Chapter 1, No Surrender. Hey, well, y'all gotta excuse me for a second. I'm, don't be mad at me, but I gotta do it like this, you know what I mean? I gotta alternate between books and chapters and all that. Um, it's a mental strategy that might cover my ass in case I get sued by the publishers of all these books that I'm infringing on. I'm just saying, like, they're gonna do it. I'm doing something I know I ain't supposed to be doing, but I'm trying to make a point. You know what I mean? Give me liberty or give me death, all that extra good shit. You know. But there's this book called Slow Medicine by Dr. Victoria Sweet. It's titled Slow Medicine: The Way to Healing. Like a lot of people that's been seeing it think it's some kind of spiritual herbal healing, like a bunch of herbs and shit like that, but it's really not. It is probably one of the greatest books I've ever encountered. I have an uncle who's a doctor who said something very smart one day. He said that after your rent or your mortgage, the second most important thing for any family in this world, especially in the United States, is having health care. You know what I mean? And there's a difference between medicine and healthcare. It used to be medicine before corporate greed got into it, and then it became healthcare. That's what slow medicine is about. I've, when I do finish this on screen now, it will be my third time reading it. That's how good it is. You know what I mean? So let me start here. I'm sorry. It says Slow Medicine: The Way to Healing by Victoria Sweet, author of God's Hotel. In the book cover it says, over the years that Victoria Sweet has been a physician, healthcare has replaced medicine. Providers look at their laptops more than at their patients, and costs keep soaring, all in the ruthless pursuit of efficiency. Yet the remedy that economists and policymakers continue to miss is almost miraculously simple. Good medicine takes more than amazing technology. It takes time. Time to respond to bodies as well as data. Time to arrive at the right diagnosis and the right treatment. Dr. Sweet knows this because she has learned and lived it over the course of her remarkable career. Here she relates unforgettable stories of the teachers, doctors, nurses, and patients through whom she discovered the practice of slow medicine, in which she has been both pioneer and inspiration. Medicine, she helps us to see, is a craft and an art, as well as a science. It is relational, personal, even spiritual. To do it well requires a hard-won wisdom that no algorithm can replace, that brings together fast and slow in a truly effective, efficient, sustainable, and humane way of healing. And the back piece has a picture of her. Says Victoria Sweet was a physician at San Francisco's Laguna Honda Hospital for more than 20 years, an experience she chronicled in God's Hotel. Another awesome ass book, yo. God's Hotel is like that. I've only gone like 3 chapters in because I was working on this, but it's a book that I'm gonna get to. I've already placed it on my shopping cart on the Thrift Book app. It's like $3.79, so I'm gonna get it in like 2 months. I'm probably gonna get it the time I get Marcellus Wiley's book. Yeah. But yeah, an experience she chronicled in God's Hotel, a doctor, a hospital, and a pilgrimage to the heart of medicine. An associate clinical professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco, she is also a prize-winning historian with a PhD in history and social medicine, and the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship. Jacket designed by Jason Boha, jacket image Don Nichols, Getty Images, and photograph of the author by Denise Zmeckle. An imprint of Penguin Random House, penguin.com. Slow Medicine, The Way to Healing, Victoria Suite, Riverhead Books, New York 2017. Riverhead Books, an imprint of Penguin Random House LLC, 375 Hudson Street, New York, New York 10014. Copyright 2017 by Victoria Suite. For my teachers, named and unnamed, known and unknown. Yeah, never lie about that. Man, every waking moment after thanking God, I thank my teachers, yo. Teachers are awesome as fuck. Contents: Introduction, Medicine Without a Soul. Chapter 1, On the Cusp of Aquarius. Chapter 2, Dr. Guru Shanti and My New White Coat. Chapter 3, The Man with a Hole in His Head. Chapter 4, Dr. Greg's 30% Solution. Chapter 5, A Successful Petition to the Saint of Impossible Causes. Chapter 6, The Mantle of Hippocrates. Chapter 7, Three Prophets Know Well. Chapter 8, Visiting Day at the Hen House. Chapter 9, A Slow Medicine Clinic Before Its Time. Chapter 10, Passing the Point of No Return. Intermission, in which fast medicine and slow medicine come together. Chapter 11, Turnaround. Chapter 12, A Craft, a Science, and an Art. Chapter 13, Upstairs, Downstairs. And then a short pause to recapitulate, or the crack in the cosmic egg. Chapter 14, the force that through the green fuses. Chapter 14, the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. Chapter 15, Nothing is Better Than Life. Chapter 16, A Slow Medicine Manifesto. Slow medicine. I care about healthcare, you know what I mean? And one of the main reasons I cared about healthcare before the Affordable Care Act, but that law made me care more about healthcare as a human cause, because for a nation this great for this long to not have universal healthcare that's affordable to people making less than 20,000 a year, less than 15,000 a year. Yeah, there are people making less than 20,000 a year in America, Trump voters. They are, believe it or not. It is necessary. When you're sick, you're sick. People that a society should be able to take care of their sick people, period. Especially a society as civilized as grand as this is, you know. But yeah. Introduction, Medicine Without a Soul. I didn't know how bad it was until my own father was in the hospital. It began on Friday afternoon on the week before Thanksgiving. Not the best time to get sick. Is there ever a good time to get sick? Even hospitals and doctors have a kind of schedule, and Friday afternoons are when we like to straighten things up for the weekend. My father came back from lunch at a restaurant with my mother, lay down for a rest, and then she observed him having a seizure. This wasn't new. He's had a few grand mal seizures over the years and was supposed to be taking seizure medication, but sometimes did not. And though my mother had seen him have seizures before, she was terrified. Seizures are terrifying, though mostly they don't hurt you. She called 911. The paramedics brought him to the lovely community hospital 5 blocks from their house. He was examined and admitted. That surprised me. Where I usually practice medicine in a public hospital in San Francisco, he would never have been admitted for a simple. I hope y'all can hear the LAPD chap outside. Like, why? Why? Like, color of law might explain why there's so much police presence in our urban communities, but it's an unnecessary noise pollutant, believe it or not. It is a public safety tool, yes, but it is a noise pollutant as well. I don't see too many of them flying over Beverly Hills or, you know, all that extra good shit. That surprised me. Where I usually practice medicine in the public hospital in San Francisco, he would never have me. He would never have been admitted for a simple recurrent grand mal seizure. We would have checked his labs and gotten a CT scan, observed him overnight in the emergency room, cranked up his seizure medication, and spit him out the next morning. Instead, at the little community hospital, the doctors were going to take their time, get his seizure medication right, let my aged mother sleep that night. How he meant. I reassured the family I would come up the next afternoon when he would be recovering from his post-seizure state and would doubtless be discharged. He would probably be better than he'd been before. Terrifying as they are to see, grand mal seizures clear the brain. Shock therapy, which sends a jolt of electricity to the brain, is designed to do the very same thing. With a grand mal seizure, everything shuts down at once, and then, rather like rebooting a computer, the, the faculties come back up one by one. First the eyes open, then the body moves, then the patient smiles. Speech comes back, then memory. In a certain way, grand mal seizures are good for you. They allow, in the same way rebooting your computer does, for everything to get reorganized, refiled. There's a clarity afterwards, a quickness. The connections are connecting right again. But when I walked into my father's private room with its view of the mountains, its natural light, I was shocked. He was in 4-point restraint, arms and legs tied to the bed corners, and he was unconscious, with a bloody bag of urine at the feet of his bed. Mother was sitting next to him, looking frightened and gray. They had been together by that time for 68 years, in a kind of Romeo and Juliet relationship. If you can imagine how irritable Romeo would have gotten after those first 20 years, how bossy and how stressed Juliet would have been with anything in life that upset Romeo, including herself. My mother was still beautiful, and my father was still a nice looking man. White hair, white hair, blue-gray eyes by turns, attentive, skeptical, and teasing. He was careful of his appearance, shirt and tie and jacket and manners. You can't spell manners without man. Men are supposed to have manners, but you know. We're going to get to that with the help of Ashley Montague and his natural superiority of women. He still opened doors for women and moved to the street side when you walked with him. He was always tough, uncomplaining. I'd never seen him defeated, frightened, or cowed until that afternoon. I left the room to find his doctor, or to be precise, the hospitalist assigned to him for that shift. Dr. Dale was alone at the nursing station, typing into a computer. I went over and introduced myself as a physician. He was in a hurry, I could tell, with other patients waiting to be seen, a state I know well. Although he didn't turn his eyes from the computer screen, he did explain. Your father came in last night with a first-time seizure, and of course we admitted him to rule out a stroke. His first CT scan was negative, so we've scheduled him for a repeat CT tomorrow, since, as you know, sometimes the first CT after a stroke is negative. I was taken aback. This was not father's first seizure, but simply another in a series of seizures. And the distinction was crucial because in a man his age, a first seizure would almost certainly be from a stroke, and he will need the stroke protocol of care. On the other hand, a seizure in a person with a history of seizure means usually that he simply forgot to take his medication. But this isn't a first-time seizure, I clarified. He's had seizures for years. Dr. Day stopped typing. He looked puzzled. I'm sure I saw first-time seizure in his electronic health record. Let me look it up. Ah, yes, here it is. I thought so. The neurologist's admission note, first-time seizure, rule out stroke. But it's not his first seizure, it's one of many. See, he even has an allergy to a seizure medication on his list of allergies right here. I was looking at the computer screen over his shoulder and pointed it out. Yes, you're right. I should change the diagnosis then. Dr. Day spent quite a bit of time trying to change the diagnosis in the computer, but did not seem satisfied with his results. Well, we'll order another CT scan. Sometimes strokes don't show up on the first CT. I went back into father's room to get another look. Perhaps I was missing something. Perhaps he's had a stroke at the exact same moment as his seizure. Father was asleep. He was alone. There was an IV running in his arm, a catheter in his bladder, and a clip on his finger sending his blood pressure and pulse wirelessly to a computer outside. I sat down on the bed and he opened his eyes. He hadn't been sleeping but pretending to be asleep. Then I examined him for any sign of a shock. His pupils were equal and reactive. Excuse me. His arms and legs were of equal strength. There were no change to his face. He was drowsy for sure. He was still recovering from his seizure, sedated from the tranquilizer he was getting, and sleep deprived. But that was all. When do I get out of here? He asked me. Pretty soon. They want to do another brain scan first. Then I went out to ask Dr. Day the reason for the catheter and the 4-point restraints. He was gone. No one else was around either. Not a nurse, not a nursing assistant, not a janitor. Father had a rocky night. He was restless and the catheter hurt him, and he kept trying to pull it out, so he was tranquilized further and kept in the restraint. His second CT scan was also negative, but the stroke protocol continued nonetheless. Dr. Day's attempts to change the electronic health record diagnosis for stroke must have been unsuccessful. So when I visited Father the next afternoon, he was still tied up and the catheter still in. By now his beard was growing out. He was unwashed, exhausted, puzzled, and alone, and weak. And because of the stroke diagnosis, he hadn't been given anything to eat, and he hadn't had a calorie for 2 days. How am I going to get out of here, he asked me. Can you spring me? They don't give me anything to eat. They've tied me up, and I can't even scratch my nose. You'll get out of here, but it will take a while. The main thing is when they come in and ask you the date and place and the president, stop telling them it's Millard Fillmore. They don't know who he is. They don't even realize you're joking, and they think you're crazy. Do you know why I'm cracking up in my head? Because when Bush was president, if I was a patient like that, getting asked questions like that, they would ask me who was president, and The Apprentice was on TV, and I had just swung past an episode the night before, and I went to the hospital the next day, I'd have probably said Donald Trump was president. That did not happen. It's just a hypothetical in hindsight. You know, if that would have happened, if I would have said that when Bush was president to somebody and then this motherfucker ended up being president, I would have slapped myself 10 times over. I ain't gonna lie. They don't know who he is. They don't realize you're joking and they think you're crazy. He looked up at me, his blue eyes still capable of twinkling. Okay. Although as I will see when I later went through his electronic health record, no one did come in and ask him the date, the place of the president. Every single person, hospitalist, nurse, therapist, simply stood in the doorway, saw an old man unshaven and tied up, and checked the box labeled confused. Every day he had a different hospitalist who followed the stroke protocol, although Father hadn't had a stroke. Speech therapy came by in the morning while he was still sedated from the night's tranquilizers and determined it would be dangerous to give him anything by mouth. Physical therapy came by and determined it was dangerous for him to get out of bed. Aspirin, blood thinners, and blood pressure medications were all started. It would have been 100% quality assurance if he'd had a stroke. Finally, Thursday arrived when the hospital would start prepping its Friday discharges, Thanksgiving notwithstanding, and that afternoon I met the first person I'd yet seen inside his room. She was also the first person wearing a white coat. She carried a clipboard and looked serious. Father was very sick, she told me. Stroke, and he wasn't allowed to have anything by mouth, so the family should begin thinking about a feeding tube. He couldn't go home, of course, and she was recommending his discharge to her rehabilitation facility tomorrow. Who was she? I wanted to know. She was a quality assurance manager, she said, putting out her hand. Glad to meet you. Your father, sure, so sad. She shook her head sympathetically and left. So the next day he was discharged to the rehabilitation facility, untied and taken off the tranquilizers. He began to wake up, walk with a walker, and eat the pureed food he was now allowed. But he still had the catheter because no one ordered it to be removed. It hurt and he wanted it out, and that Monday afternoon he pulled it out himself and then collapsed. When I saw him in the emergency room a few hours later, I gave him a 50% chance of surviving. His blood pressure was very low. He was gray, barely conscious, and obviously septic with bacteria in his blood. Now he was admitted to the low-level ICU, the SDU, step-down units, on 3 antibiotics with the catheter backing, and as a patient who had a stroke and couldn't eat. Even though he hadn't had a stroke, no one had been able to change that initial diagnosis in the electronic health records. First-time seizure, rule out stroke. So nothing by mouth, salt water in his veins, tied to the bed corners and sedated. Now I have 3 sisters, and 2 of them had been keeping watch. But finally, the third sister, the lawyer, flew in, took one look at him, and moved into his hospital room. That's how we learned what wasn't being done, feeding him, comforting him, changing the sheets without hurting him, not to speak of getting the right diagnosis and the right treatment. What were we going to do? We had a family meeting. Things were going from bad to worse, we all agreed. We had to get father out of the hospital as soon as possible, and sooner of the catheter, the restraints, and the tranquilizer. But how? There was only one way I knew to save our father. Only one way, hospice. We would have to convince whichever current hospitalis he had that the family had decided to let father go. If we didn't, then the next step on his death express would be a Clostridium difficile, C. diff, infection from the antibiotic he was getting for the urine infection in his blood from the catheter he didn't need, followed by a bed sore, a nursing home, and a prolonged, expensive, dwindling death. That whole part right there just described healthcare, y'all. Literally. That part right there where she says, there was only one way I knew to save our father. Only one way, hospice. We would have to convince whichever current hospitalis he had that the family had decided to let father go. If we didn't, this right here describes what happens when somebody becomes sick in America without insurance. The next stop on his death express will be a C. diff infection from the antibiotics he was getting, from the urine infection in his blood, from the catheter he didn't need, followed by a bed sore, a nursing home, and a prolonged, expensive, dwindling death. David Letterman's top 10 points to death without health insurance in America. What up, Dave? I miss your top 10s, man. Man, you'd have had some beautiful, awesome ass top 10s doing this dumbass's presidency. Miss him. Back to slow medicine. So the next morning I tracked down his current hospitalis, who happened to be Dr. Day, his first doctor. The every 12-hour cycle of different physicians having come around again. We had a family meeting last night. I began. Hospitalis likes family meetings, I knew. We went over father's course and we agreed. He's 93, he's lived a good life, it's time, so we decided to take him home. We'll have round-the-clock care, and my sister, the lawyer, is talking with hospice right now. Dr. Day looked up at me from his computer. He frowned, but he did start typing in the discharge orders. You know, I would never do this if he wants going to do hospice. Yes, of course. He needs 2 more days of IV antibiotics. He sighed. He didn't really believe me. I listened to the click of the keys as he typed. How satisfying. Discharge, discontinue catheter, discontinue restraints, discontinue sedatives, IVs, oxygen, and puree diet. Discharge patients. 5 hours after those clicks, father had arrived home, rolling out of the ambulance in the gurney and demanding a steak and a beer. He was hungry, he said, and they had never fed him, not once, in their hospital. He ate the steak and drank the beer, no problem. A few hours later, the hospice arrived. They did everything the hospital didn't do. They looked at father and touched him. They sat on his bed. They talked to mother. They figured the family out and realized pretty quickly that father wasn't dying anytime soon. Then they were humane and smart. They let him stay on hospice for 2 months until he was recovered from his near-fatal hospital admission and back to his pre-hospital self. Hospice is proof that the problem with healthcare is not in the players but in something else. Alright. I have a bad habit of writing in books while I'm reading them. And most of these books that I'm reading here are books that I checked out in the library. Right now, I owe the library about $57 and some change. It was about $70 some dollars. I paid them 35 and some change about a month or so ago. So I still have about 10 books out. They, the the senior librarian at the branch I go to, she's probably assuming that I've probably decided not to return and sell those books online, but there's a method to my madness. I wasn't done reading them yet. One of the books that they're charging me $35 for right now is The Color of Law that I pointed out earlier. So, yeah. I have a habit of writing, and I have written this little blurb. You can't really see it, but you know, my handwriting is like chicken scratch. I have written that little blurb in this part where it says that hospice is proof that the problem with healthcare is not in the place but in something else. I wrote on the side of it, only other possibility is profit, greed. And I wrote below that, potential of Buffett, Bezos, and JP Morgan. You know, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and JP Morgan are coming together trying to create a healthcare company that takes profits out of the equation. So they're working on it. I think they're gonna come up with something cool. Just like how insurance came about because of people going to war and then jobs wanting to attract people, attract good workers, then they started throwing health insurance benefits as one of the perks of working for said company. You know, business is very important for America, but you also need regulation by government to make sure that business doesn't run afoul of the people that they're supposed to be not running afoul of, you know. But yeah, I just had to pinpoint that out. And if anybody out there living in Los Angeles, pick up any of these books that I've read on here, and you see little blurbs with looking like chicken scratch, that's the alpha copy. Do it. Hashtag got the alpha copy. Corny. Not as corny as Eminem though, huh? Yo, Machine Gun Kelly. I've been such an Eminem fan. I'm like such a stan, such a shady head. I've been waiting for somebody to actually rip Eminem a new one in a diss track, and no one had ever done it. Benzino couldn't do it. Jack couldn't do it. No one else could do it. You did it though. I guess it takes white to trump white, huh? Get it? It takes white to trump white. Ah! Slim Shady, how did they send the twin babies? It's okay, go ahead, Holly. Da-da! I digress. I'd known that healthcare was getting even more bureaucratic, that doctors and nurses had less and less time to take care of their patients, that they were spending more and more of their time in front of a computer screen entering healthcare data. I'd experienced it myself, but until that week, I had no idea how bad it had become. If I, as a physician, couldn't get appropriate care from a family member in a lovely community hospital with well-trained staff, who could? What had happened to medicine and nursing, I asked myself. To find out, I ordered up father's electronic health record and went over his near-death experience. The document was 812 pages long and took me 4 hours to read. It began not with the doctor's notes, but with hundreds of pages of pharmacy orders, then hundreds of pages of nursing notes, which were simple boxes checked. Only the doctor's notes were narrative, and mostly they were cut and paste. No wonder no one could figure out what was really going on. Still, to be fair, although I found mistakes in the record, Father had after all gotten discharged, and even if he had stayed in the hospital for those extra 2 days, he probably would have gotten home. Sure, he might have had a bed sore or four, but I had to admit, judging by those electronic health records, his stay in the hospital looked 100% quality assured. There was just something missing, and it was hard to put my finger on it. Everything looked so good in the computer, and yet what Father had gotten was not medicine but healthcare. Medicine without a soul. That's what healthcare has become. Medicine without a soul. What do I mean by soul? I meant was Father. I mean what Father did not get: presence, attention, judgment, kindness. Above all, responsibility. No one took responsibility for the story. The essence of medicine is story. Finding the right story, understanding the true story, being unsatisfied with a story that does not make sense. Healthcare, on the other hand, deconstructs stories, deconstructs story into thousands of tiny pieces, pages of boxes and check marks for which no one is responsible. A robot doctor could have cared for my father just as well. What happened to my father is one example of how medicine is being practiced today, or rather how healthcare is being provided. Not every civilization has cared about the health of its citizenry, but we do. We spend 17.5% of our GDP, 17.5% of our energy and resources on health, sickness, and disease. And yet we've ended up with a healthcare system in which the only way to get good healthcare is to go home to die. My father's hospital looked so great with its cheerful website announcing its dedication to treating the whole patient. Many of the staff have even read my book, God's Hotel. The book was about my experience being a doctor in an unusual hospital in San Francisco. I titled it God's Hotel because that's what hotels were once called back in the Middle Ages. Hotel Dieu. The replacement of medicine by healthcare had come to that hospital while I was practicing there. And I'd written the book as a cautionary tale. Don't let this happen to your hospital, to your doctor. Some of the staff at my father's hospital had read it at their book club, and the chief of medicine asked me for my autograph. And still, my father could not get the kind of care at their hospital their doctors, nurses, and even marketing people knew it needed. So the experience with my father shocked me. It highlighted the difference between my own version of medicine and the version being put into place even as I write. By version of medicine, I mean the complex of ideas that come out of whichever model we use for the body, and the way of healing that results from that. My own version of medicine began to form in medical school when I learned modern medicine, which is based on the idea that the body is best understood as a machine or a collection of machines. So the brain is a computer, the heart is a pump, the lungs are bellows, the kidney a filtering device. Disease, therefore, is a breakdown, and the doctor is a mechanic whose job is to find what's broken and fix it or replace it. The way of healing that comes out of this model is focus. It is a taking apart and peering in, reductionist, linear, and step by step. It is a powerful way of understanding the body, the main reason for the incredible progress of modern medicine, and I still use it. But as I began to see patients, I also began to realize that there was something missing from that version of medicine. It explained a lot, but not everything. That patients sometimes get better on their own. The importance of relationship, the healing effects of time. I looked around for another model for understanding my patients, and I found it in pre-modern medicine, when the body was thought to be best approached as a plant. In this model, disease is a mismatch between the inner body and the outer world, and the doctor is most likely a gardener, fussing and fiddling, doing a little of this and a little of that. its way of healing is diffuse, global. It is seeing the patient in the context of his environment, changing what can be changed, and removing what is in the way of the patient's healing on its own. I added that model to my evolving version of medicine. The version of medicine I saw with my father could not be more different. In this new model, the body is seen as a computer, or rather as a collection of computers which are our cells. Disease is an error in the program that runs those cells, our DNA code. And its way of healing is to edit and rewrite that incorrect code. So the doctor is a data provider and programmer, and the patient is a source of data. The body itself is simply an interface, a screen, the outer reflection of an inner code. So its way of healing is at a distance, hands off, analytic and without a soul by design. I don't know how successful this version of medicine will turn out to be, but what I do know is that no matter how useful it is to imagine the body sometimes as a machine, sometimes as a plant, and perhaps also sometimes as a computer, the real body of the patient is none of these. It isn't just more complicated than a machine, plant, or computer. It is other to anything we can imagine. The only model that could represent it as it really is, the only model that could represent it as it really is will be itself. So the only thing that can represent the body is the body itself. Like, I got tongue tied there a little bit. The way of healing associated with their real body is uncanny. It is inductive rather than deductive. Interdependent. It is a way in which there is a give and take between body and caregiver, patient and doctor. A mutually constitutive way among every organ, every cell, and every process. A feel for it developed in me only gradually, over many years of seeing patients, of watching, observing, and practicing. I knew it, I used it, but for a long time I had no way of thinking about it. And then slow food arrived. Slow food, so counterculture, so counter to our culture of fast, focus, and fixing or throwing away. Like the body I had come to know, slow food was subtle and relational, with its emphasis not on the goal but on the process. Its insight that the equality its insight that the quality of the ingredients and the way of doing something determine the end. That the way to something has to be the way of something. Only then did I have a way of thinking about the version of medicine I knew. It was slow medicine. I wasn't the only person to come up with this concept. All over the world, many others have independently arrived at the notion of slow medicine. Slow medicine is in the air and an important model for the future for all of us to understand. So what I have done in this book is to collect the moments when some element, some facet of this way of healing revealed itself to me. A doctor holding up his hands, his hidden hands, to show me with a smile. A nurse standing in the doorway about to go out, get in her car and save a life. A patient presenting me with the gift of his 1 minute from fatal aneurysm, floating in a glass jar, symbol, as you shall see, of everything that goes to make up slow, which is not simply soul but also expertise, knowledge, hard work, logic, and method. I have done this because I believe that if you too experience what I experienced, you will be brought to the same conclusion about what we need to make our medicine the medicine we deserve. We don't need to remake our healthcare system or rebuild it from the ground up. We don't need to do very much. It's pretty simple, quite attainable, just an added perspective and a change of pace. It would take me many years and many adventures to discover this way. However, I would start to find it even before I started to look, because I wasn't anyone who would have expected to be wandering on this particular path. But nor was it a path I expected myself to wander on. It would start long before I became a doctor, when everything that was going to happen was beginning to pop. The first bubbles appearing on a very particular book. The concept hadn't been invented yet when I got my first taste of slow. Next is chapter 1, on the cusp of Aquarius. Dr. Elisha Wallman wrote this book called This Narrow Space. A pediatric oncologist, his Jewish, Muslim, and Christian patients in a hospital in Jerusalem. Elisha Wallman. And the incisely reads, a memoir both bittersweet and inspiring by an American pediatric oncologist who spent 7 years in Jerusalem treating children, Israeli Jews, Muslims and Christians, and Palestinian Arabs from the West Bank and Gaza, who had all been diagnosed with cancer. In 2007, Elisha Wallman, a New York-based doctor in his mid-30s, was offered his dream job, attending physician at Jerusalem's Hadassah Medical Center. He had gone to medical school in Israel and spent time there as a teenager. Now he was going to give something back to the land he loved. But in the wake of a financial crisis at the hospital, Wallman, with considerable regrets, left Hadassah in 2014 and returned to the United States. This Narrow Space is his poignant memoir of 7 years that were filled with a deep sense of accomplishment, but also with frustration when regional politics got in the way of his patients' care, and with tension over the fine line he had to walk when the religious traditions of some of his patients' families made it difficult for him to give those children the care he felt they deserved. Navigating the baffling Israeli bureaucracy, the ever-present threats of full-scale war, and the cultural clashes that sometimes spilled into his clinic, Wallman learned to be content with small victories: a young patient whose disease went into remission, broken-hearted parents whose final hours with their child were made meaningful and comforting. Wallman also struggled with his own questions of identity and belief, and with the intractable conflict between Israelis and Palestinians that had become a fact of his daily life. What he learned about himself, about the complex country that he was now a part of, and about the brave and endearing children he cared for, whether they were from Rehavia, Miha, Shiarim, Ramallah, or Gaza City. We'll move and challenge readers everywhere. Elisa Wallman is Associate Chief Division of Pediatric Palliative Care at the Ann and Robert H. Laurie Children's Hospital of Chicago. He was formerly Medical Director of Pediatric Palliative Care at the Morgan Stanley Children's Hospital at Columbia University Medical Center in New York. He received his BA from Yale University and his medical degree from the Sackler School of Medicine in Tel Aviv. He also trained at Mount Sinai Medical Center and Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York and at Boston Children's Hospital. His writings has appeared in Bellevue Literary Review, The Hill, The Washington Post, The New York Times, and Time. He lives in Chicago. Jacket cover, The Door, Adrian 825, Getty Images. Bed, blend image, Getty Images. Jacket cover by Oliver Monday. Skorken Books, New York, January 2018. This Narrow Space. A pediatric oncologist is Jewish, Muslim, and Christian patients in a hospital in Jerusalem by Elisha Wallman. Skorken Books. This is a work of non-fiction. Nonetheless, some of the names and personal characteristics of the individuals involved have been changed in order to disguise their identities. Any resulting resemblance to persons living or dead is entirely coincidental or unintentional. For Sasha and Lev, who broadened my horizons beyond my dreams. He has a poem before he enters into the book, and the poem is titled Try to Remember Some Details. It goes, try to remember some details. Remember the clothing of the ones you love, so that on the day of loss you'll be able to say, last seen wearing such and such, brown jacket, white hat. Try to remember some details, for they have no face, and their soul is hidden, and their crying is the same as their laughter, and their silence and their shouting rise to one height, and their body temperature is between 98 and 104 degrees, and they have no life outside this narrow space, and they have no graven image, no likeness, no memory, and they have paper cups on the day of their rejoicing, and paper cups that are used only once, only. Try to remember some details, for the world is filled with people who return from their sleep with no one to mend the tear. And unlike wild beasts, they live each in his lonely hiding place, and they die together on battlefields and in hospitals. And the earth will swallow all of them, good and evil together, all the followers of Korah, all of them in their rebellion against death, their mouths open till the last moments, praising and cursing in a single howl. Try to remember some details. Yehuda by Yehuda Amichai. Yehuda, that's the first name. Amichai, Amichai. This Narrow Space. When I say this book is awesome, and is this part in it that where he sees a sign. It's on a school that's built in Gaza, I think, somewhere in Gaza. But he sees a sign that's built that has, he sees a sign on the school that says, "We refuse to be enemies." You know what I mean? Like, if it wasn't for that line, I wouldn't have included this book right here. This book right here is in my list of books, because as good as it is a beautiful book, and it has to do with children that has cancer in a place where they're fighting over something as stupid as different beliefs. I'm sorry if I'm saying your beliefs are stupid, but I'm not saying your beliefs are stupid. I'm saying, like, being at each other's throat over something as closely resembling with such minor, mundane, niggling little differences is just stupid to me. And I'm Muslim, like I have no problems with anybody of any religion, period. Like, you know what I mean? Like I said at some point already, father had the foresight to put his kids in Christian schools, even though we had to go to church events multiple times a year. He didn't care about that. You know what I mean? That wasn't gonna change who we are. But if he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be able to read and break shit down like I can today. He provided me that foundation, regardless of what the religious difference was. So that's why I say I was raised like that, so I don't have to deal with it. I don't have to worry about having that. But maybe the Muslims in America right now, having a conversation, especially I have a conversation with anybody that's Latino or Hispanic, whichever phrase it is less offensive, because I know saying Spanish is offensive, you know. So, but telling somebody that's Latino in especially in LA, I'm finding out that you're Muslim, they automatically classify you as ISIS or Al Qaeda or Bin Laden. They already know ISIS. They still know Al Qaeda. You know what I mean? That's how deep rooted that false perception is. You know what I mean? So like that's one of the reason I decided to read this book, because there's this line on page 234. If you are reading this book, if you're holding this book in front of you right now, turn to page 234. At the end of the first paragraph on that page, it says, on it written in black pen in Hebrew and Arabic, we refuse to be enemies. And this way is written, and right here, like I wrote, I, and I wrote, like, imagine if black and brown refused to be enemies in America. Every racist, bigoted white motherfucker in America just cringe right now at that thought. I'm sorry. I'm not speaking of the entire white race. I'm speaking of the 45% racist cohorts that voted for this idiot. You know what I mean? They just cringe right now as the thought of black and brown refusing to be enemies. We're not enemies to whites. They make us their enemy because of our potential mentally, you know. But we're gonna get back to Shaliza Wallman. Let me go back to what started all this. We're back to we had left off earlier, like, you know what I mean, in the context of television seasons, like maybe 2 seasons back. You know what I mean? Like I said, all this is coming at you at once. I don't know if this is like episode 28 or 29 or 27. I don't even know. I'm just doing them. I have deleted so much. I've deleted over 117 hours of recordings I had done. I had done overtime, you know what I mean? Some of them were kind of peaceful because they were done during Ramadan, so you can't really cuss during Ramadan. But long story short, though, let me get back to Black Power, the Politics of Liberation, the book that was written 51 years ago. Excuse me. That coined the phrase in institutional racism. In much the same way, present-day vested political, economic, and social privileges and rights tend to be rationalized and defended by persons and groups who hold such prerogatives. Whenever a number of persons within a society have enjoyed for a considerable period of time certain opportunities for getting wealth, for exercising power and authority, and for successfully claiming prestige and social difference. There is a strong tendency for these people to feel that these benefits are theirs by right. The advantages come to be thought of as normal, proper, customary, as sanctioned by time, precedent, and social consensus. Proposals to change the existing situation arouse reactions of moral indignation. Elaborate doctrines are developed to show the inevitability and rightness of the existing scheme of things. An established system of vested interest is a powerful thing, perhaps especially when differences in power, wealth, and prestige coincide with relatively indelible symbols of collective membership, such as shared hereditary physical traits, a distinctive religion, or persistently held culture. The holders of an advantaged position seize themselves as a group and reinforce one another in their attitudes. Any qualms about the justice of the status quo seem to be diminished by the group character of the arrangement. That last part was from Robert M. Williams Jr.'s Prejudice in Society, the American Negro Reference Book. Edited by John P. Davis, Englewood Cliff, New Jersey, Prentice Hall, 1966, pages 727 to 729. But what about the official separation of powers? The system of checks and balances. We are well aware that political power is supposedly divided at the national level between the President, the Congress, and the courts. But somehow the war in Vietnam has proceeded without congressional approval. We are aware that congressional niceties, really, they quickly become irrelevancies, divide power between the federal government and the states. But somehow the Supreme Court has found no difficulty in expanding the powers of Congress over interstate commerce. At the same time, we are told that the federal government is very limited in what it can do to stop whites from attacking and murdering civil rights workers. A group interest does exist and it crosses all its supposed lines when necessary, thereby rendering them irrelevant. Furthermore, whites frequently see themselves as a monolithic group on racial issues and act accordingly. They do. Tea Party movement. Like when it's a white issue, when it's an issue, period, it's a white issue. Like they ain't gotta be divided on something that's beneficial to mainstream America, which necessarily means white America. You know. The black community perceives the white power structure in very concrete terms. The man in the ghetto sees his white landlord come only to collect exuberant rent and fail to make necessary repairs, while both know that the white-dominated city building inspection department will wink at violations or impose only slight fines. The man in the ghetto sees the white policeman on the corner brutally manhandle a black drunkard in the doorway and at the same time accepts a payoff from one of the agents of the white control racket. He sees the streets in the ghettos lined with uncollected garbage, and he knows that the powers which could send trucks in to collect their garbage are white. When they don't, he knows the reason: the low political esteem in which the black community is held. He looks at the absence of a meaningful curriculum in the ghetto schools. For example, the history books that woefully overlook the historical achievements of black people. And he knows that the school board is controlled by whites. And there's a bookmark on here that says studies have shown the heavy preponderance of business and professional men on school boards throughout the country. One survey showed that such people, although only 15% of the population, constituted 76% of school board members in a national sample. The percentage of laborers on the board was only 3%. William C. Mitchell, The American Polity, A Social and Cultural Interpretation, Glencoe, Illinois, Free Press, 1962.